A single frame, hidden inside one of the most awarded films in American history, has been fooling audiences for over 30 years. Forrest Gump, the film that swept the 1995 Academy Awards and turned a simple man sitting on a bench into a cultural icon, contains a visual flaw so well disguised that it slipped past studio executives, professional critics, and even the very visual effects artists who built the illusion frame by frame. This is the story of that overlooked mistake, the astonishing technical achievement that made it possible in the first place, and why, even decades later, uncovering it changes the way we look at one of cinema's most beloved masterpieces. To understand how this blooper came to exist, you first have to understand the impossible task director Robert Zemeckis set out to accomplish. He wanted Forrest, a fictional character played by Tom Hanks, to physically exist inside real historical footage. Not reenactments. Not lookalikes. Actual archival film of American presidents, protest marches, and moments the public already recognized as authentic history. Achieving this required visual effects supervisor Ken Ralston and his team at Industrial Light and Magic to digitally insert a modern actor into decades-old footage that was never designed to accommodate him, matching grain, lighting, shadow direction, and camera movement with painstaking precision. For their work, the visual effects team won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, a recognition that remains one of the most deserved in the category's history considering the technology available at the time. Forrest Gump was released in 1994, years before digital filmmaking tools became standard, which means much of this seamless blending was achieved through techniques that today's filmmakers would consider primitive at best. But technical brilliance, no matter how advanced, still depends on human judgment, and human judgment leaves room for error. Somewhere inside the archival composite sequences, particularly the ones where Forrest is inserted into genuine news footage from years earlier, the lighting direction of the original historical film does not perfectly match the lighting used when Tom Hanks was filmed separately in front of a blue screen. If you pause certain frames and study the shadows cast by the people surrounding him in the real archival footage, then compare them to the shadow angle implied by Forrest's own lighting setup, the two simply do not align. It is the kind of inconsistency the human eye almost never catches during a normal viewing, because the brain is far too occupied processing dialogue, historical context, and the emotional pull of Forrest's narration. But under frame-by-frame scrutiny, the kind conducted by devoted film analysts and continuity trackers over the years, the mismatch becomes undeniable. It is a flaw that could only be discovered by someone deliberately hunting for imperfection inside a film built entirely on the promise of seamlessness. This detail matters far beyond being a simple technical footnote. It reveals something profound about how a film like Forrest Gump functions as a kind of magic trick performed 24 times every second for nearly 2.5 hours. Audiences are asked to believe not only in the improbable journey of a slow-talking man from Alabama, but in the physical reality of him standing beside men who were, in truth, filmed years or even decades before Hanks ever stepped onto a soundstage. When that illusion holds, viewers laugh, cry, and reflect. When it slips, even by a fraction of a degree in shadow placement, it exposes the seams behind the craft that made the illusion possible. What makes this particular blooper so compelling is not merely its existence, but how long it remained hidden. Before the film's release, visual effects artists had none of the instant digital previewing tools that filmmakers rely on today. Ken Ralston and his collaborators were essentially bridging two separate eras of footage using tools that, by modern standards, were remarkably limited. Considering that reality, the fact that so few visible inconsistencies exist across the entire film is a testament to their extraordinary skill rather than a mark against it. The shadow mismatch is less a mistake to mock and more a quiet reminder of the human limitations that even the most celebrated visual effects artists of their generation had to work within. This is far from the only detail that has slipped past viewers over the decades. Film enthusiasts who combed through the movie's continuity, cataloged extensively across dedicated film communities, have pointed to smaller inconsistencies scattered throughout the story. Some have noted that the length and style of Forrest's hair does not always align precisely with the specific year being depicted, given how many decades the story jumps across. Others have pointed to small background props, packaging, or design choices that reflect manufacturing conventions from a slightly later era than the story claims to represent. These kinds of continuity slips are almost unavoidable in any period film, since dressing every single frame with historically perfect props from one exact year is an enormous logistical challenge, even for a production backed by the resources of Paramount Pictures. None of these details diminish what Forrest Gump accomplished as a piece of storytelling. If anything, understanding how the illusion was constructed makes the achievement more impressive, not less. Winston Groom, the author whose 1986 novel gave birth to Forrest as a character, could never have imagined that his creation would eventually be woven, quite literally, into the fabric of real American historical footage on the big screen. Groom's original novel was a far more satirical and irreverent work than the film that emerged from it, and it was screenwriter Eric Roth who reshaped Forrest into the gentler, more emotionally resonant figure audiences ultimately fell in love with. Blending real history with an entirely invented narrative was always going to be a delicate operation, both creatively and technically, and the fact that only a handful of frame-level inconsistencies exist across the finished film speaks volumes about how carefully that operation was executed. There is something quietly moving about the fact that this blooper went unnoticed for so long. It suggests audiences were never watching Forrest Gump searching for flaws. They were absorbed in a father telling his son a defining story about loss, love, war, and destiny. They were caught up in Forrest's unwavering devotion to Jenny, in Lieutenant Dan's transformation from a bitter, broken man into someone who eventually finds peace, in Bubba's quiet dream of a shrimp boat that never came true for him but did in the end, for the friend he left behind. When a film manages to hold an audience's attention that completely, technical imperfections simply stop mattering in the moment. It is only decades later, with the luxury of pause buttons, high-definition remasters, and communities of dedicated analysts revisiting every frame, that details like this resurface at all. In many ways, this small imperfection mirrors the very theme at the heart of Forrest Gump itself. The film never pretended its protagonist was flawless or that his path through life followed any kind of neat, orderly design. Forrest stumbled into greatness almost by accident. He misunderstood the historical moments he witnessed even as he unknowingly helped shape them. He lost people he loved deeply and made choices that, by conventional logic, made little sense. And yet none of that imperfection diminished the emotional truth of his story. If anything, it made him more human, more relatable, more real to the millions who watched him. Perhaps it is fitting, then, that the film built around this imperfect, wandering, deeply sincere character carries its own small imperfection buried somewhere inside its most technically daring scenes. Even the most celebrated work of cinematic craftsmanship, made by some of the most skilled visual effects artists of their generation, could not fully escape the very human reality that perfection is often an illusion we simply choose to believe in, rather than something that truly exists. It is worth remembering, too, that Forrest Gump was never a film built purely on visual trickery. Its emotional foundation came from performances, not pixels. Tom Hanks, who would go on to win the Academy Award for Best Actor for this role, built Forrest's voice and cadence by closely studying young actor Michael Connor Humphrey, the Mississippi native cast as the childhood version of the character. That collaboration gave Forrest a consistent, believable Southern rhythm across both the child and adult versions of the role, something audiences absorbed without ever consciously noticing the craftsmanship behind it. Similarly, Gary Sinise's portrayal of Lieutenant Dan relied on a combination of committed physical performance and now groundbreaking visual effects work that digitally removed his legs after he wore blue fabric coverings during filming. These effects were not flashy for their own sake. They existed entirely in service of emotional truth, which is precisely why the far more subtle shadow mismatch buried inside the historical footage sequences went unnoticed for so long. Audiences were never meant to study the film for errors. They were meant to feel it. 30 years after its release, Forrest Gump remains one of the most quoted, most beloved, and most emotionally enduring films ever made. Its box office success, critical acclaim, and lasting cultural footprint remain almost unmatched for a film of its era, and it continues to introduce new generations to a story about resilience, loyalty, and the strange, unpredictable shape a single life can take. Knowing now about this quiet, long-hidden blooper tucked inside its most groundbreaking visual sequences does not diminish that legacy. If anything, it deepens it. It reminds us that behind every seamless illusion on screen, there are real people making real decisions under real limitations, doing everything within their power to give an audience something worth believing in. Forrest Gump asked viewers to believe that an ordinary man could quietly witness extraordinary history. In its own understated way, this hidden imperfection asks something else of us entirely. It asks us to believe that even our most cherished stories, crafted with extraordinary care by extraordinarily talented people, remain touched by the same beautiful, unavoidable imperfection that defines everything, and everyone, truly human.